Politics doesn't always collapse in scandals. Sometimes the most revealing moments are the ones nobody planned to notice. A sentence that sounds normal until you realize what it actually said. A pause that lasts 1 second too long. A room that goes quiet for reasons no one will explain. This is one of those moments. Gavin Newsom sat down for what was supposed to be a friendly interview. Softball questions. Familiar territory. The kind of conversation that generates clips for social media and reminds people why he's considered a rising national figure. It was a political podcast, one of the big ones. Not partisan, not hostile, just conversational. The host has interviewed dozens of politicians. Most of them say the same things: resilience, public service, fighting for working families, standard language that means everything and nothing. Newsom showed up polished as always. Sharp suit, perfect hair. The kind of presence that makes people say he looks presidential. He's given hundreds of interviews like this. He knows how it works. And for the first 40 minutes, it went exactly as expected. He talked about California's economy, about climate policy, about immigration reform. He was articulate, confident on message. Nothing surprising. Nothing controversial. Then the host asked him a question. Not a gotcha question. Not a trap. Just one of those generic wrap-up questions interviewers ask at the end. What's something you wish more people understood about politics? Newsom smiled. He paused. And then he said something that felt different. He said, I think people would be surprised how much of this is performance. Not lying. Just performance. You learn pretty quickly that sincerity doesn't scale. What scales is the appearance of sincerity. The host laughed. A little uncomfortable, unsure if that was self-deprecation or confession. Newsom kept going. He said, people want authenticity. They say they do. But what they actually respond to is the image of authenticity. The rehearsed moment that feels spontaneous. The curated casualness. I'm not saying that's good or bad. I'm just saying that's how it works. The host tried to pivot, asked him about his policy priorities. Newsom answered. The interview ended normally. They shook hands. The episode went live a few days later. And at first, nothing happened. The episode got normal engagement. A few clips circulated. Political watchers tweeted about his policy points. Standard stuff. But then something shifted. Not loudly. Not with headlines. Just a shift. Democratic operatives who usually promote Newsom's interviews didn't share this one. Allies who typically post clips stayed quiet. Strategists who work with him didn't amplify his message. Progressive commentators who often criticize him from the left didn't pile on either. They just didn't engage. The silence was noticeable. Not because people were attacking him, because people weren't saying anything. When reporters asked his team about the interview, they got vague responses. The governor speaks for himself. We stand by his record. California's results speak louder than words. None of those statements actually addressed what he said. Within Democratic circles, people started talking. Not in public. In private conversations. Group chats. Off-the-record calls. And the message was consistent. That wasn't smart. Not because he was wrong. Because he said it out loud. Here's what happened. Newsom did something politicians almost never do. He acknowledged the mechanism. He named the performance. He said the quiet part. Not in a scandalous way, but in a matter-of-fact way that somehow made it worse. Because everyone knows politics involves image management. Everyone understands that politicians are careful about how they present themselves. That's not new, but politicians aren't supposed to say it. They're supposed to maintain the fiction that everything they do is genuine, that their folksy town halls are spontaneous, that their perfectly timed empathy is organic, that their relatability is natural, not calculated. The whole system depends on that fiction. And Newsom violated it. Not with malice. Almost casually. Like he forgot for a moment that he was supposed to pretend. What made people uncomfortable wasn't that he was dishonest. It's that he was honest about the dishonesty. He acknowledged that politics is theater, that sincerity is a strategy, that authenticity is something you perform, not something you are. And once you say that out loud, it changes how people hear everything else you say. Because now when he talks about fighting for working families, people think, is that genuine? Or is that the performance he just described? When he posts a casual photo with his kids, people wonder, did that happen naturally? Or was it staged for the image of authenticity? When he speaks passionately about an issue, the question becomes, does he actually care? Or is this what scales? He created a lens through which all his future actions get interpreted. And that lens makes everything look calculated. That's why his allies went quiet. Not because they disagreed with what he said, because they couldn't defend it without making it worse. If they said he didn't mean it that way, it implies he's careless with his words. Not great for someone with presidential ambition. If they said he was being honest, it confirms that yes, everything is performance, which undermines the entire political brand. If they said nothing, maybe it would blow over. So they said nothing. But the thing about saying nothing is that it creates its own message. Silence from your allies is louder than criticism from your enemies. Because your enemies are supposed to attack you. That's expected. But when your own people won't defend you, it suggests the problem isn't what your opponents are saying. It's what you say. And what Newsom said wasn't factually wrong. Politics does involve performance. Image does matter. Curated authenticity is a real strategy that everyone uses. But there's a difference between doing something and admitting you're doing it. Politicians who successfully manage their image do it invisibly. They create the appearance of authenticity so seamlessly that people don't question it. The performance is so polished, it doesn't look like performance. Newsom broke that fourth wall. He admitted the trick while he was still performing it. And once the audience knows it's a trick, it stops working. This is what separates successful politicians from unsuccessful ones. Not their policies, not their charisma, their ability to maintain the illusion while executing the strategy. Obama did this brilliantly. He was incredibly strategic about his image. Every gesture calculated, every speech crafted, but he never acknowledged it publicly. So people believed the authenticity was real. Reagan did it too. His entire persona was a performance, but he committed to it so fully that it became indistinguishable from reality. Newsom is strategic. Everyone knows that. But most successful politicians hide the strategy behind the persona. Newsom revealed the persona as the strategy. And that's a problem, because presidential campaigns aren't just about policy or competence. They're about trust. About believing that the person asking for your vote actually cares about you, not just about winning. Once people think you see them as an audience to perform for rather than citizens to serve, that trust erodes. Newsom probably didn't think his comment would matter. It was one sentence in a long interview. Casual. Reflective. Not mean-spirited or cynical. But in politics, it's not always what you say. It's what people hear. And what people heard was, I know this is all performance. And I'm okay with that. Which makes voters ask, if you're performing for me, what's the real you actually like? And what does that real you actually believe? Those are uncomfortable questions. And they don't have good answers. Because once you admit you're performing, people start wondering what you're hiding. Not because you said something scandalous. Because you admitted you've been calculating all along. This wasn't a scandal. No rules were broken. No lies were told. If anything, it was a moment of honesty. But honesty about the performance undermines the performance. And that's why people close to him went quiet. They couldn't spin it. They couldn't reframe it. They couldn't make it go away. So they just let it sit there, hoping people would forget. But people don't really forget moments like this. They just file them away. And the next time Newsom does something that looks too polished, too rehearsed, too perfectly calibrated, people will remember. They'll remember that he told them it was all performance. And once you know you're watching a performance, you can't unsee it. Nobody said there was a problem. Nobody called for him to apologize. Nobody wrote op-eds about how this disqualifies him from higher office. But everyone acted like something had shifted. Democratic strategists started talking more about other potential candidates. Donors started hedging their bets. Allies became more measured in their praise. Not because they don't think he's capable. Because they're not sure he can win. And in politics, capability doesn't matter if electability is in question. Newsom will probably be fine. He's still governor of the largest state in the country. He's still a national figure. He still has ambition and infrastructure. But something changed. Not dramatically. Not irrevocably. Just subtly. The way people talk about him now includes a caveat. A qualifier. A sense that he's very good at this. Maybe too good. That's not where you want to be if you're trying to connect with voters who already distrust politicians. And the thing is, he wasn't wrong. Politics is performance. Authenticity is curated. Sincerity is strategic. But you're not supposed to say that. Because the moment you do, you become the person who admits they're playing a game while asking people to believe you're not. And once that happens, things don't really go back to normal.